Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Self-Help Book Club for our latest read, which I'm sure you know if you're here, is Drama Free. I'm featuring a very special guest tonight. So I'm Tony, I'm your host and the founder of the Self-Help Club, which is a community and platform all about celebrating self-help and mental health and working on ourselves. And tonight, I'm delighted that we are joined by relationship expert, licensed therapist, newly minted podcast host, I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that, and best-selling author Nedra Glover Tawwab, who is, as I said, the author of Drama Free and also Set Boundaries, Find Peace, which I know many of you, if not all of you, have read because you've told me that I need to have that as our book at the moment for a long time. So Nedra has practiced relationship therapy for 15 years, and her philosophy is that a lack of boundaries and assertiveness underlie most relationship issues. Anybody relate to that? Let me know in the chat if you do. And Nedra's gift is helping people create healthy relationships with themselves and each other. Pretty much, which is what I try to do here with Self-Help, sharing the tools, sharing the books, introducing you guys to experts like Nedra. Drama Free is a guide to managing unhealthy family relationships. It's Nedra's second book. It's our 47th read as a community, and we are loving unpacking this together. So hello, Nedra. Thank you so much for being here and for your time and for your books and for everything you do.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've been seeing all of the love on social media, so thank you so much.
Oh, we really appreciate it. And it's been really interesting because we've only had one meetup so far and it's been about part one. So this book is in 3 parts, as the guys online, most of the guys online know. And I think the first part is probably the most, it's the most difficult, isn't it? Because it's unpacking and unlearning and kind of bringing awareness to what dysfunction is. And then as we go through the book, it's getting kind of, I feel like it gets more positive and easier, as lots of self-help books do. So yeah, we've had the one meetup, but we're really enjoying it. And I think it's great to do this with friends, like with a community, to do this kind of work. And you say that quite a lot in the book, don't you? That finding people to talk to about this kind of stuff is a really good way to help unpack it and support.
Yeah, operating alone with this level of dysfunction in a family can be really tough. And I think the people we typically go to are the other people in the family who haven't accepted some of the issues in the family. And then we feel rejected and we're like, no one is listening to me, when the someone can be this book club, or it can be your friends, or it might be a coworker, who knows? But it's really important to find support when you're dealing with these really difficult topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to start today, where are you and how are you today?
I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, here in the USA. And, today is a really good day. I garden and it's nice and sunny. So, having a great day.
And what does a typical day in your life look like? Is there a typical day anymore?
I try not to be too rigid, but what I've been enjoying lately is getting up in the morning, stepping into more of a face ritual. So washing my face and getting myself together. And then I have a tall glass of water followed by a hot cup of tea. I pack lunches for my girls. I get them off to school and then I come back. I read, I journal, I work out, and then I start my work for the day.
And you're a big bookworm, aren't you?
I am a huge bookworm. I'm looking at my desk and I have 4 books right here in my lineup of what's next. Right now, I'm listening to a book as well as reading a book. So I am like, give me all of the books that I can have, please.
Yeah, well, you're definitely in the right place. The people will be relating to that. This is your tribe. So in the introduction, I talked about how your work is really about helping people have a better relationship with themselves and other people. And that's what I really love about it. What would you say is a relationship with yourself? Do you have one word or a phrase that would sum that up at the moment?
It's very compassionate. Yeah, that's my one word. I have a compassionate relationship with myself.
And how has that changed over the past 5 years, say?
Oh, I wouldn't say over the last 5 years. I would give it 7, right? I would say shortly after motherhood, I learned that grace is the way to peace with yourself, right? Like you have to give yourself a lot of grace and compassion, because I was very hard on myself there for a while, like trying to do all of the things, trying to mother in the ideal way as I saw it, trying to still be able to perform in certain ways. And I had to, really accept that things are different and they should look different.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes when things become different, we're still trying to make it look the same way. And
Yeah.
so I really had to accept that, wow, things are different and I have to exist in a different way. There are some relationships I'll have to pull back on. There are some things in life that I'll, maybe I can do, but even that will look differently. So things are really in a different space. And I talk myself through the differentness just by being compassionate.
That's amazing. We did an event with Dr. Kristen Neff. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she talks about self-compassion. That's her area. And we all learned so much about that, just about kind of giving, I love the term giving yourself grace. And I suppose acceptance is it's a big theme in this book, a big theme in a lot of your work, but especially in this book, the idea that you can't change people. You quite often can't change situations. So stop trying, and that will give you a lot more peace.
Yeah. Acceptance is, for some of us, a very long path. Many of us will fight the good fight of trying to change the other person. How do I make this person a better listener? How do I make this person pay attention to me? How do I make this person make these changes in their life? How do I make this person stop drinking? Like all of these things we want other people to do. And we get so upset at them for not meeting our expectation of who we think they should be.
Yeah.
It's not even their expectation for themselves. It's our expectation of them. And here we are like, you must do these things that I see as the most beneficial things for you to do. And, people often fall short. And sometimes those people are our parents, it's our siblings, it's, grandparents, it's aunts and uncles, friends and partners, and all sorts of things. And once we recognize this person has shown me over and over that this is who they are. One, do I want the relationship? And if I want the relationship, how do I exist in a relationship with a person who does whatever it is? It doesn't mean, like sometimes, the issue is the person is, not conscious of your time and they're always late to stuff.
Yeah.
How do you manage a relationship with a person who's late? You can tell them an earlier time. You can kind of accept that they're just going to be late when they get there. When they get there, you can be mad every single time they show up late, even though you already know they're going to do it. Or you can stop talking to them. And I'm sure there's something there that I didn't even think of. But, there are different ways to deal with, something that we see as an issue. What might be an issue for you may not be an issue for me. There are some people in my life, I know they're going to be late. I don't care. I don't care. It's not, that might not be the deal breaker for me as long as you show up at some point. So we all have different things. And I think we get ourselves into a lot of trouble when we try to make our thing someone else's thing. When we say, well, I care about this thing, why don't you care about this as much? Sometimes people don't want the level of nurturing that you may want in a relationship, or they may not even need it from this particular person. This happens a lot with our siblings, where we're trying to get the sibling to agree with our story. This is my story with mom and dad. You don't agree with exactly what I'm saying. And they're like, no, I don't, because they're a different person. They have different things. They may be getting these needs met in other places, and therefore may not need this or want this as much as you do. It doesn't mean that what you want or need is not important. It just means that it's different.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, because in the last, in our meetup, the community, I think most of us agreed that we aren't the ones that we think should be in therapy. It's everybody else in our life. So a group like this, where we're very, very interested in kind of like, self-awareness, self-development, growth, quite often we're kind of like, we want the other people in our life to be doing the same thing. But I was listening to your podcast today, and you said, just because you're ready doesn't mean anyone else is ready to, especially in a family system where you're kind of highlighting something or unpacking something. So I think it's really a good, that's such a good to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah.
So boundaries is a huge, is what you're kind of famous for. It's a huge part of your work. And is boundaries still, is it the number one issue that people come to you with? Or they probably come to you with different issues, but is it the number one issue that you kind of,
yeah. I mean, and I don't know, maybe I just have boundary colored glasses, but I feel like I see so many things through a lens of boundaries. I was talking to someone whose friend canceled on them at the last minute, and the friend said, "Oh my gosh, I had so much going on." And I thought, wow, this person knew they had a lot going on when they committed. What if they would have said no then? What if we really thought about what we're taking on before we say yes to someone and they start to depend on us? You know, I think so many things are boundaries according to my definition of boundaries, right? My definition is needs, expectations that we have in relationships. They can be, you know, we can communicate our boundaries through our words, we can communicate our boundaries through our actions. But my need and my expectation, once I ask you to show up for me and you agree to it, is now that you show up. If that does not fit what you can do, my expectation is that you say no, or you let me, you know, like those sort of things. So many things that we, you know, run into in relationships are really centered on us not being able to communicate in a certain way and not having the courage sometimes to say some things. And what I find really important is we have to really work on our ability to receive information. Sometimes people are not telling us stuff because we are unwilling to hear anything. And so it's not that, you know, oh my gosh, I don't know what the issue is. Sometimes people have told us the issue and we're not really listening. And so once they start to give us the silent treatment or they start to back away, we're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? It's like, I've said it 100 times, you didn't listen. I don't want to keep yelling it to you. I've already stated my boundaries. You've demonstrated that you don't want to adhere to them.
And when you start setting boundaries, when one starts setting boundaries, especially with family, what are the repercussions are there specific repercussions you could expect, or ripple effects that you might expect, and how's the best, and what's a good way to deal with that, or prepare for that, I suppose?
Commonly in families, when people place boundaries, what tends to happen is arguing. They will try to talk you out of your boundary. Well, why this? Why do you want it this way? So-and-so didn't want it this way. I did this last week and you didn't say anything. So there's a lot of conflict around what the boundary is and why I have to listen to it. Once you move past that phase, now you have to see, is this person going to adhere to the boundary, or will they reject the boundary, or will they try to change the boundary a little bit? And that's where the boundary giver starts to develop some consistency, hopefully. If you want this person to listen to a boundary, you have to be really consistent. You know, a kid doesn't understand a bedtime that's all over the place. One day is 7, one day is 9:30, one day is 8. So if you say to them at 6 o'clock, hey, it's time to go to bed, they're like, wait a minute. I went to bed at 10 p.m. yesterday. So consistency is really important when you're starting to implement boundaries with a person. So once they can understand it on a regular basis, then you may want to ease up. If you want to change the boundary, you may want to keep it forever. There may be some people that you just don't want to say certain things to, or you never want to have them, you know, over your house for a holiday or whatever it is. But, you know, you can change your boundaries as needed. So it's not like, once I say this to a person, it's this way forever. You may tell a family member, you know, hey, when I tell you certain things, don't tell anyone. But then there may be something else you want to tell them, like, hey, I'm getting married. You're like, call everybody. So you determine, when you want someone to share and when you don't. Like it's all your stuff, and it's a case by case basis. It's not every family member will need the same boundary. It's like some people, they really get it, and you don't have to tell them,
Yeah.
hey, here's my boundary. And then there are others, every single time you'll have to repeat your boundary to them.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the quotes I shared recently with the community was from the book. No longer will I give passes to people because of their title or the length of time they've been in my life. And I think that's so important, isn't it? Because and you talk about it a lot in the book, how it's because it's family, or because it's the way it's always been done, or because it's mom or dad or sister or whatever, then we let things slide, which we absolutely shouldn't. Why do you think boundaries are so important for our own mental health?
I've seen people suffer terrible anxiety when it comes to having to engage with people they have problematic relationships with. It makes it harder to speak up because now you're afraid, you're uncomfortable, you feel, automatically guilty just by thinking about certain things. So when we're in relationships with people and we have something that may be, hard for them to hear, do we want to think about, oh my gosh, if I say this, they're going to not talk to me for 2 days, or they're, like all of these really, things that keep us away from communication. So with mental health, I see a lot of anxiety and depression when it comes to our relationships. We're very anxious about how we engage with people. And the depression sort of kicks in when we start to just disengage because people have become too difficult for us to manage. So now we just completely pull away.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that the book is split into 3 parts. And why did you do that? Is this so there's unlearning dysfunction, there's healing, and then there's growing. Is that the path that you see most of your clients, audience, most people that kind of come to you? Is that the path that the transformational path that you kind of see them take?
Absolutely. You can't fix anything until you see a problem.
Yeah.
There are some very unhealthy behaviors that I've heard about, that I've witnessed. And if people don't see a problem with it, then it's not a problem. And it's not always my job to say, hey, do you think your mom should talk to you like that? Or, hey, do you think that's okay? It's people start to talk about it and they'll say, the other day when I went over my mom's house, she said this. And that lets me know that you think it's a problem because you're talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you're in the unlearning phase. All right. Okay. And then you start talking about this problem that they're starting to see, like, oh my gosh, like, so I'm hearing you say you don't like the way this person talks to you. And we go through that. And then we start to talk about the history of that, like when it started, what sort of things this person has said or done, and how you've been feeling for all of these years. And then we start to talk about the wound. How has this impacted your life? How has this impacted your relationship with this person? And then from there, we can start to repair, or we can start to, figure out if this is a relationship we want to keep. 90% of folks want to keep the relationships. I just threw a stat out there. Maybe it's not 90%. Most people want to keep relationships with folks, even if they're dysfunctional. That is why I wrote this book.
Yeah.
This book is not about cutting people off. It's mostly about staying in relationships. There is a tiny bit about cutting folks off, which I agree with. I agree with staying as well, depending on the circumstances and if you can manage it in a mentally healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key word, isn't it? It's managing these relationships and helping them to work for you and the other person.
Some things are just unmanageable.
Yeah.
Surgeons couldn't manage some of these dysfunctional relationships. And it's like, but a lot of it is teaching people, how do we stop going back for more from people who are doing certain things? How do we, if we have a sibling who is in a competition with us, and every time you get a new car, they get a new car. Every time you get a new haircut, they get a new haircut. Every time you get a dog, they get 2 dogs. Like if they're in this competition with us, how do we show up in this relationship with integrity to ourselves and really honoring ourselves? And we agree to, I'm not going to compete with this person. And when I notice it, maybe I'll start to say something. Maybe that's the change in the relationship. Wow, that's interesting. You're getting a dog too. Just these little shifts we can make. I notice whenever I say, I'm getting something new, you start to have a conversation about you getting something new. Wow, I seem like a really inspirational figure in your life. Just sort of bringing up these things that sometimes we just remain silent about them. We don't say anything to the person, and it's really bothering to us. Like, oh my gosh, every time I get something, they get something. But the person doesn't even know that you're observing it, because they know this about themselves. They may think they're truly inspired from some other force other than you.
And like you say, and like we try, like I think is a message in a lot of self-help, it's what we can control is ourselves and our responses. And I think one of your recent podcast episodes was be an advocate for low chaos. Like, like whatever's going on around you, whether that's in this relationship, in this situation, you can be the low chaos and you can choose that path. And I think that's such a powerful reminder that you can choose that path.
Yeah. Penelope is saying sometimes we're afraid of their reaction. That's the anxiety. That's the anxiety, that we have so much anxiety around how they'll respond or how they'll take this information that we can't even have the conversations. That the relationship is now causing us a level of anxiety around our communication.
Yeah, and the way to deal with that is have the hard conversation, is it?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, even if I'm thinking that says, even if we make a joke, jokes are tricky. I've heard some mean things said, and the person saying them may say, oh, well, it was a joke. So jabs sometimes are disguised as jokes. Right? Like people can say like, oh my gosh, your hair looks like a beach whale. What does that mean? Is a beach whale cute? Like, I'm so confused. What did you, it's like, what did you just say? Oh, I'm just joking with you. That was the meanest joke I've ever heard. So with jokes, sometimes we have to be very careful around what we're saying. We have to make sure we're not roasting people. A joke and a roast are two different things. And I think what's happening is we're roasting people and we're like, oh, that's funny. Well, roast, people agree to be roasted. They want you to say bad things about them. You're making a joke about me. That's just me. I didn't agree to this.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also in the book at the end, there is quite a bit of troubleshooting, which is brilliant. And I think what we love is that you give us examples of things to say, and there's lots of case studies, and there's lots of kind of real life in this situation. It could look like this, which I think is what lots of us need, that kind of almost a script for how do we say, stop making fun of me, or stop like kind of commenting on my house every time you come round, and all that kind of stuff. We were going to troubleshoot just 3 questions. We've got let's just do 2 of them if we have time, if that's okay. I know we need to let you go at 7:30, 2:30 your time. So one of the questions we had was about addiction. So what can I do to help someone in my family who is struggling with addiction without enabling or being codependent?
Well, the first thing to consider is, has this person asked for any sort of help? If they haven't asked for help and you notice a problem, you can go to them in a very caring way and say, hey, I'm noticing whatever that is. I notice that, you're doing more drugs than usual, or you're having more drug-related incidents. So you're oversleeping for work, you're leaving your kids here, or whatever those things are. And I want to help you be well. So let the person know that, I'm seeing this. I love you. I care. How can I help? There are other times where the person comes to you and they have an issue and they do want help. And then there's the person who is happily in their addiction and they don't want your help at all. They just want to be able to drink or get high and they want you to fully leave them alone. And in those situations, you have to create some clear boundaries around how you will or won't help them.
Mhm.
So if they are short on their rent and you know it's because they were buying drugs, will you help them or will you not help them? If you decide to help them, up to what amount? How often?
Yeah.
Really being clear around, maybe I love this person and I don't want them to be on the street, but this is how I help. Or, I don't want to help a person who is doing this sort of thing. Like, I don't want to get myself in a situation where I'm paying their bills every month. So
Mhm.
it's for you to figure out. There's really no right or wrong, but I think the thing to show up with is love and to let them know, I care. I care. I'm concerned. I see this. How can I help? Is there anything I could do? Here are some resources. So connecting them to some resources can be another way to help. Now, if this person has a long-standing addiction issue, I think it's really about figuring out how you want to help them or not, how you want to have a relationship with that person. Do you want to have them in all the spaces of your life? Or is this a person you need to meet at a certain cafe and maybe they don't get to come to the family gathering?
Yeah. So working out in your head what it looks like for you and sticking to that, because that's going to keep you sane. Yeah. Thank you. Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is on the idea of betrayal, and this came up in our last community meeting actually about the book. How do we deal with those feelings of betrayal you have when we talk about our families to other people, especially when we're talking about problem situations in the family?
Hmm. I think of betrayal as something that's not rooted in truth. It is
Mhm.
something that we're doing to intentionally harm someone. We are trying to get something from it. We are trying to maybe endanger a person in some way. When you are speaking the truth, that is not the intention. It is about you. It is to recover yourself. It is to heal. It is to show up in a healthier way in the world. It can be quite impossible sometimes to get through certain things without being honest about those things.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
very hard to get to the other side of having some of these family issues if you never talk about them. And so it's not telling everybody, it's not writing a tell-all book. It might not be going on a podcast to talk about it, but it could be, with yourself and with those that you trust, really being honest about some of the things that you dealt with in those relationships or some of the things that you continue to deal with in those relationships with the intention of getting it out,
Yeah.
because it living inside of you creates a very toxic inner space. And you want to make sure that you're getting it out. You don't need to keep everything in you as a protection to other people because it's really harmful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Thank you, Nedra. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for your time today. It's been wonderful to spend some time with you. And thank you for this book and all that you do. Thank you guys for being here, and
You're
for your
welcome.
questions. And yeah, I could talk to you all night. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're
Take
welcome.
care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.